Welcome to History Where It Happened. I'm Dick Smith. Today we're in Barre, Vermont, the granite capital of the world. And we're actually in front of a statue of Robert Burns, this great Scottish poet from the 18th century. Why Robert Burns in front of the Vermont Historical Society? Well, a lot of the immigrants that came to Barre, Italians and so on, a lot of them were from Scotland. And Robert Burns was the most famous poet. He was also known as the plowman poet, very humble person. And you can see his clothes, and it looks like he's returning home from a day in the fields. But now if you scan down a little, you'll see these amazing 4 panels. Those 4 panels were done by the Italian sculptor Elia Corti. And they're amazing 3D relief drawings. There's 4 of them. 3 represent the poems of Robert Burns, and the one on the other side is of the cottage he lived in Scotland. And you can see the details here. And this was all done in granite. But let's go over to the Hope Cemetery, where you see a lot more of the amazing tombstones and carvings of these immigrants that came to Barre. We're now at Hope Cemetery here in Barre, Vermont. This is the entrance. You can see the statues are of peace and salvation. But come on inside and I'll give you a little more background of Hope Cemetery itself. The cemetery itself was established around 1895. There are over 10,000 tombstones here. And it was estimated at one time that in the United States, or not one time, by several people, that currently over 1/3 of all the tombstones in the United States are Barre Gray, and that's the stone that was quarried here at the Barre quarries. It's also interesting, a lot of the artisans who worked in the Barre quarries also designed their own tombstones. About 70% did that. There's also something sort of sad here, as we'll point out. A lot of the people died because of their profession, which was carving these tombstones, because they had silicosis, all the dust and everything. So a lot of people here died at a very young age. There was also a Spanish flu epidemic, so a lot of people died as a result of that. But come on, let's now take a look at some of the more interesting tombstones. We're now at the tombstone, the statue of Elia Corti. As I mentioned before, Elia Corti was actually a very good master artisan himself, a stone carver. This particular tombstone is made out of one solid piece of granite, which is amazing. It was done by his brother, who carved all of this. They carved it from one piece. There's a very good likeness of him, and I understand it's almost life-size with him. The interesting thing about Elia Corti is a little of his history, the sad history. He was born in 1869, and he died in 1903. It was a real tragedy. He was only about 34 years old, I believe. But here in Barre, there was factions, there were groups, there were anarchists and socialists. And Elia Corti went to one of these meetings, and a fight broke out, and he was sort of a bystander, and guns were used, and for some reason, somehow, he took a bullet and died at the early age of 34. But this is a wonderful, wonderful tombstone here, done by his brother. We're now at the Perrojo, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, the Perrojo family plot. There are some other people here, the Perrojo family. But one of the interesting features of this is that wonderful hand carving up here. This is very traditional, the toes and so on. This is all done out of granite. And this particular one, if you look closely at the face, it shows an exquisite granite carving of a human face. And the robe looks real. We're now at the tombstone of Palmisano. One thing that's of interest as you walk around here, and we hope everyone will come to Hope Cemetery, is that you notice how there's no date of birth or date of death or town or anything. It's very simple, just with the last name, Palmisano. But this is a really classic artisan's work. This was actually hand carved from the original Michelangelo Pieta in Italy. And if you get up close and you look at the feet and the hands, this was all done out of one piece of granite, and the face and the robes. It is really an art museum here. We're now at the John Rosso tombstone. One comment about a lot of the tombstones around, if you walk around, you'll see a lot of objects. A lot of the objects that are put onto these tombstones were the hobbies of the individual, or perhaps his profession, or his family member's profession, or the family business, and so on. Obviously, John Rosso loved sailing ships, and this is a wonderful example of 3D carving. I don't know if it picks it up in the camera, but it's a wonderful example. John Rosso, this is one of the newer tombstones, was also a veteran in World War I. We're now at the Comoli tombstone. In a lot of these tombstones as you walk around, and we'll probably show you a couple of these tombstones without me talking, but you can see a lot of these tombstones have flowers in them, and these are wonderful relief flowers. 3D, it's beautifully done. It really shows the artisans that were here, the Italian artisans. But at the top is an urn, and a lot of these monuments have something at the top. This happens to symbolize, in the case of this urn, heavenly gardens. But this is a very well done statue. We're now at the Gare tombstone. Obviously this is a race car, and the man was actually Armand J. Gare III, but they call him Joey. He was a race car driver, and his car was number 61. What's sort of tragic is, when you look down here, he was born in 1963. He died in 1991. He was hardly 30 years old. And of all things, he died in a snowmobile accident. But this is a beautiful example here of an artisan carving a wonderful tombstone to pay tribute to someone's profession. We're now at the Lacroix tombstone. As you can tell, the title, or guess, the title of this is Couple in Bed. It's the grave of Louis A. Lacroix, and he died in 1988. It's one of the newer, more contemporary tombstones here. And Louis Lacroix was actually a World War II veteran, 1941 to 1945. And that's his wife, Vera Lacroix. But here's the inscription: "But God hath promised strength for the day, rest for the labor, light for the way, grace for the trials, help from above, in falling sympathy, undying love." And obviously, he really loved his wife, and their final tombstone is a couple in bed. Well, I hope you enjoyed our visit to Hope Cemetery here in Barre. It's really a fascinating place, but as you can imagine, with 10,000 stones, monuments, we can't really talk about every single one of them. But if you're up in the Barre area, please visit the Rock of Ages quarry. They have plenty of information here. They have walking tours. They have tours based on your iPad or iPhone and so on. But it really is a fascinating place, and it's a real tribute to a lot of the immigrants that came here to the United States, in particular Barre, the Italian, Spanish, Norwegian, and so on.